Hello and welcome to the final part of my critique of Outlast. This has been quite an insane set of videos, I'm sure you'll agree. How in the hell did I manage to get it this long? It is double the size of my Resident Evil 7 series, which to me makes no bloody sense. But hey, I think almost everything about Outlast has been covered and we should be able to make up for what remains very soon. In closing about the AI and scripting, there was one thing you guys should see from my second stream of the Whistleblower DLC.
Wait, what? Oh, shit. Alright.
Why?
Shirts and skins or fuck off. 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 Shirts and skins or fuck off.
There were so many little moments where I would stumble across embarrassing breaches in the AI and what they would have intended for the enemies. Like, did they genuinely think it was scary to have this guy saying shirts and skins or fuck off over and over again? I don't think so. Despite that, they have something else returning in spades. Gratuitous is the word, and I wanted to make it clear we're all on the same page for what it means. It is defined as done without good reason, uncalled for. This means that things happen and you can't account for why in a meaningful way. Instead, you'll cynically assume it was for something else, something cheaper. Fan service is often gratuitous. Typically, gratuitous violence just means we have to endure gore because the director or writers decided that they wanted to shock their audience whether or not it was for adding to the story. Gratuitous nudity would essentially be fan service, and it's used to get approval from a particular part of your overall audience at the expense of disapproval from the audience that is more concerned with the meaningful content in a series. So, Outlast takes place in an insane asylum with psychopaths and mentally unstable patients being made worse by the experiments they have had performed on them. This means we should be expecting something pretty disgusting in terms of gore, and that's what we do get. It makes a point about the dregs of humanity and sets the atmosphere of what you can expect to happen to you at the worst. But then the game just gets fucking weird. Whistleblower opens with a guy licking you, and it comes across as a little silly and over the top. Like the game is trying to be super uncomfortable and weird, trying to put the player off. To keep it up though, just like the main game, we need more sexual violence, don't we? Just a random guy having a wank, cause why not? This adds to the content, doesn't it? It's hard to draw any kind of line for this kind of content, since you could easily make the argument that this stuff is going to turn up in places like this, and that I'm wrong for assuming otherwise. However, the line for me is the moment you realize that you're asking yourself why the developers would have put this in the game as opposed to how disgusting the thing is. Another line that gets crossed is when they don't allow your brain to wander whatsoever, and there's a very simple comparison for this one. In Amnesia, you will see the tools that were used for torture, you will hear the people who were victimized by these tools cry for help, and you'll see small amounts of blood and flesh. You will never be shown what these things do in a straightforward manner, it's all for your imagination, and it sets atmosphere wonderfully. In Outlast, you see a man with breasts sewn onto his chest, his genitals have been torn off and replaced with another person's head, and the whole scenario is littered with blood. This didn't scare me, I simply stood there asking myself why they felt the need to include this. Was it to try and push the envelope? To be the game that would go this far? Because this reminds me of Hostel so bloody much. I watched that film with the exact same feeling. Why? What value does your project have just by flashing this shit so heavily in my face? It would seem that their only goal was to be as gory and uncomfortable and disgusting as possible. Frictional could have done this with their project, but they value imagination, and have been on record saying that they have respect for the human experience, and that showing things like that just to gross people out isn't very impressive as an idea. It isn't very creative. It simply feels that since this was the end of the series or the game, and it was their last chance to be as gory as possible, about 10 minutes from the end they just had to make it as scary as possible. Now, I decided to combine my conclusion for Whistleblower and Outlast all into one, so prepare yourselves folks, because this is the end. As you guys have probably noticed, I haven't spent much time with other reviewers in this series, and I wish I could say it's because I listened to your comments and tried to tone it down. But it was more to do with the fact that there wasn't so much work to really look at, and that it was a simple result of when this game was released. We're talking about a simpler time on YouTube, a time where people made videos because it was their passion, because they were interested in sharing their perspective. It wasn't about trying to make money. Because as I've been making this series, I have actually noticed quite a trend once again. It's like clockwork. When Resident Evil 7 came out, I was at the forefront of reviewing it, so I got to see all of these videos that were just clickbait. The videos that ended in "and here's why" and "secretly" and all the other sort of terms that make you want to click that video, regardless of its content. And the exact same thing has happened for Crash Bandicoot. My friends and I have already checked out several of the videos in relation to Crash Bandicoot, and a large portion of them will be from 10 minutes to 30, and it'll be on a topic that's very clickbait. For example, the problem of nostalgia. A video that explains to the audience that the only reason they wanted to buy Crash Bandicoot was nostalgia, and the only reason they think that the new game is hard or difficult or bad is because they have a romanticized version of the old game in their head. This was a perspective covered by the people who reviewed Yooka-Laylee as well, and I find it so bloody annoying. It's such an easy topic to be able to approach, to simply say, there's something you didn't realize, gentle viewers. You didn't realize that your own brain is your enemy. Because this video literally ends with a reference to a scientific paper about how the brain only wants to protect itself, and therefore it will only remember things well. It's a completely narrow view of psychology because we obviously have plenty of evidence that the brain is not protecting us all the time. Two examples of this phenomenon would be, one, that we actively search out negative news, that we respond and click on negative news regularly, and the other would be that we could have 5 positive comments and 1 negative, and guess which one we respond to. The point is that there's an ongoing cancer in YouTube reviews, and it used to just apply to songs, jokes, pranks. It moved into the commentary community, as many of you are probably aware of, basically spending between 10 and 11 minutes talking about a subject that was new and clickbait. But now it's spreading into the analytical side of YouTube, and it is driving me insane. Every time a new subject comes out, every time a new game comes out, every time a new video comes out, someone else makes a video, and it's about the analysis of that thing, but it'll be such a milquetoast analysis. Crash Bandicoot trilogy releases? Well, let's make a video about how nostalgia is a problem that no one is aware of. This is going to be a recurring theme in my videos, and I want it said here and now that I have a huge problem with this. That people aren't sharing interesting ideas anymore, that it's all just a smarter version of clickbait. But then again, I am a very controversial channel. I really don't like much content on YouTube at all. I actually take after Colossal is crazy in saying that about 99.9% of YouTube videos are dreadful. And that's probably too harsh. But hey, it's probably why you actually subscribe to this channel, right? Like, that I'm a complete dick. Anyway, what I did notice in terms of Outlast was that, of course, these were amateurs, that there were lots of videos that were made when people were just trying to see what works. And so there was a huge amount of reviewers trying to be super cool or super funny. Just weird, but it doesn't stop there. We have comedy that has aged horribly bad. Check this out.
By the way, naming the evil entity in this game the Wall Rider was kind of a bad move. It just reminds me of a Tony Hawk trick.
Then we have sort of JonTron rip-offs.
I'm gonna do a scary game. Are you ready? NFL 90... No, this is not it.
Puns.
You most likely will outlast Outlast's biggest appeal.
More horribly bad jokes.
Graphics aren't iridescent paint dipped in glitter on a pair of butt cheeks, but they're still good.
Children being weird.
I actually haven't even played it, but my Xbox right here.
See you next time. What the fuck? Why did I just flick you? I'm so sorry.
This.
He thinks he's gonna get a valuable scoop, but what he's more likely to get is murdered by naked psychopaths!
I bet you jumped. I'm not the only pussy. Yeah, you jumped. Yeah, you did.
And also, you remember The Investigamer? This is how his video opens, I shit you not.
Outlast is a first-person survival horror game.
Holy shit, mate. You are so fucking cool. I wish I could be you. Though seriously, these videos still give the whole load of buzzwords that didn't really make for an interesting perspective. I think this is just a problem in writing all over. And you know what? I'm probably a victim of it myself. If you were to split up all of my videos, you could probably find a time where I've described something with a word that could mean multiple things. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to point it out in other people's videos, so how about we do it right here?
Outlast is near perfectly designed with decent progression indicators.
I only have a few complaints about this otherwise flawless game.
And I gotta say that there was at least 4 or 5 times in this game where I genuinely felt like my heart was jumping out of its chest. And that, my friends, is a sign of a well-played, well-done survival horror game.
The jump scares in this game are intense and well-placed. They never feel cheap.
So that's one Harry Mason out of the possible 5.
Outlast has a fairly interesting, if not sort of cheesy, and really deep story.
The story is just so hard to follow.
Take my word that the stories interconnect in a very significant and cool fashion.
Finally, the soundtrack is really well done. In fact, it has highlights.
Well, the sound design could have been better, in my opinion. Even with headphones, the game wasn't really that impressive.
Sometimes it's easy to get lost. You're running around dying over and over again, breaking immersion because you're getting frustrated at dying because you can't see the stupid air vents.
Outlast suffers from an over-reliance on vents.
It pays a lot of detail to that first-person mode.
Poor level design.
Outlast has a tendency to bog down via uninspired mission objectives and a few disappointing design choices. Sadly, Outlast bogs down a bit when it tries to shoehorn gamey elements into the horror experience.
Outlast delivers a decent stealth game to the deficit of true scares.
I wish there was more horror involved than what's currently present.
At its core, Outlast isn't solely about survival. It's also about discovery.
More baffling than terrifying.
Feels a bit generic at times.
That isn't horror. That's an illusion of horror.
It all seemed a little too cliche.
Draw you away from the insanity to wade in the shallow pools of cliche.
As much as I just criticized it, it is interesting to get an overall impression of what people think of Outlast, and it is amusing to listen to. But as you can hear, it is mostly quick and useless and ends with this shit almost every time.
Thumbs up if you like the video, subscribe if you're new to the channel.
Please comment, like, and subscribe.
Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe.
Give it a like, subscribe.
Leave a like and subscribe for more content.
Favorite, share, comment, subscribe.
Please like, share, subscribe, and comment.
Subscribe, like, blah, 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 blah.
Go ahead, leave it a like, add it to your favorite, share with your family and friends, and subscribe.
Give me a like, share with your friends, leave a comment, say what's up in the comment section below.
Please subscribe to my channel.
But what did they think overall?
Overall, Outlast is an instant classic and a must-play for horror fans, period.
I really can't recommend this game highly enough.
I highly suggest that you play this.
The only other game that I've played that's as stressful as Outlast is probably Five Nights at Freddy's.
No other horror game so well recreates the survival escapist feeling seen in classic horror movies.
Pretty much a good game. It was a good, great game.
By all means, check in, get a physical, but you might want to opt for outpatient care.
Is it the scariest game ever made? Yeah.
Outlast is a solid 4 out of 5.
I'm going to give this game 4.5 out of 5 stars.
I give it 7 out of 10.
Final score ranks 4 out of 5, Harry Masons.
I really enjoyed it. I'm giving it 8.5.
I'm giving it 6 out of 10.
I really don't have anything much to say about this. It felt like listening to a bunch of random people talk about their experience, and that was something refreshing, in a way. It didn't feel like listening to Mark Brown, or Joseph Anderson, or H-Bomber Guy, or GGG Man Lives, or ACG, or even Noah. Or any of the other popular reviewers. I didn't have to constantly correct them after being told something is definitively bad or labeled as something else. It was a really nice experience, however fate wasn't kind enough to leave me alone entirely. Noah managed to get a video out on Outlast at possibly the worst time in terms of me responding to it. It almost feels like fate, considering when I was making my Soma videos, literally halfway through is when Joseph Anderson released his, or at least when I was made aware of it. Now this section is going to cover Noah entirely, and I think that some of you really don't like it when I actually criticize people that you also enjoy, so please skip to this time code in order to continue with Outlast and ignore the part where I'm going to break down Noah, because I got a little bit tired of listening to his video. So, if you've continued to listen, then here we go. Noah brought back all of the feelings, all of the experience of trying to listen openly to someone with such a narrow mindset. Someone who believes they know exactly what happened in Outlast to a T. And I guess you could say it about me, but at least my video on Outlast wasn't a 10-minute rant. This thing took months to compile. I try to show evidence for every last point I'm making. I'm trying to convince you that I'm not biased in any way, shape, or form, and I just want to tell you what the hell's going on. So let's give old Noah another chance, before I make some critical comments about him.
As the game gets into its later stages, the player undergoes a serious degradation of the self. You lose pieces of your mind, you lose pieces of your body, you drop your camera through a great crack in the floor, and when you find it again, the screen is permanently cracked. All the suffering inflicted upon the player is cumulative. You get more and more hurt.
I think I can fully agree with that. You sort of take mementos of the more significant moments in the game, though it really is just the fingers, the camera, and the mental strain, I suppose.
You'll bleed out of your stumps every time you climb a ledge, open a door, or flip a switch for the rest of the game. Then the camera gets shattered. Still works, like you, but barely. Outlast's greatest area of skill as a piece of horror movie is how it shifts between hope and despondency, dangling the possibility of escape and then snatching it away.
You almost had me there, Noah. You were doing great. You managed to describe in analytical terms why the game has value. A game that I don't even like. It isn't easy to convince me to take it very seriously as good content, but then you almost did. And then you threw the whole movie thing in there again. Now, since my videos are almost all analysis of video games with reviewer stuff peppered through, I would like to point out also that this whole thing has been a learning curve for myself in what language I use and how I communicate my ideas. I learn more about the games I am covering or additional media I am recommending to experience. This means that I openly accept criticism, and I know I've said that before, which is precisely why I dole it out as well. Reviewers and critics deserve criticism, some more than others, and I won't be pulling punches here. As you guys consume my content, you will see it morph over time in terms of my tone and approach to this sort of thing. But once again, let's do something that will very likely get me some dislikes. Noah has a very strong narrative in his video. It is presented in the title, Gamifying Found Footage. Now, I was initially confused because of what I have previously stated. The game was simply a normal survival horror game with some filters and a focus on light management. If we want to talk about how you can look at it abstractly, then go right ahead, but it serves no purpose for figuring out what Outlast objectively offers us in terms of design and mechanics. Now, a narrative is like the thread of the critic's story as they make their video. You can often tell if they're going one way or another from their title or their opening statement. For example, Crash Bandicoot and the nostalgia problem. Everything he's going to say is going to be related to the nostalgia problem. Anything that would fight against the statement would likely be thrown out. Now, someone could argue that my narrative is that Outlast is a bad game, but I have made the point to say that Outlast is actually very good in several sections, and that I would like people to decide whether or not they think it's a good game themselves, and then I can share my opinion at the end. I like to be ambiguous about the points of my videos. I don't want you guys to know what I actually think. Not until the end. I think there's much more value in the discussion if we don't actually have active narratives pushing you one way or another. I like to think I'm not even making a narrative. I'm trying to be fair to the game and represent what it gave me to you guys. However, many others have a plan from the get-go, and this means that they will morph information as much as they can to suit their very narrative. Now, since this is Noah's narrative, you know how well Outlast performs found footage, it has infected his ability to discern what takes place in this game. He will describe something in a very straightforward manner, but then he will bring it back to found footage regardless of how clunky or desperate it may seem. The reason this is important is that I want you guys to know that I don't go after people for envy or jealousy or some kind of personal vendetta. In fact, I try to recommend channels that I think are putting out excellent work. For example, you guys should seriously consider subscribing to Retro Ahoy, a channel that does extreme amounts of research that takes ages to put out videos, and every one of them is a detailed description of everything in the title. Easily one of my favorite channels on YouTube. Another channel would be ER, a guy who spends all of his time ripping to shreds content that other people have decided is fantastic. He's very similar to YMS, but I actually find him to be far more entertaining. And that's just a personal preference, but hey. And finally, Colossal is Crazy, as I recommended before, is such a funny fucker, as well as being completely unadulterated and unfiltered when it comes to his opinions on what content is good, bad, and what content can be proven to be those things. For some incredible, consistent, and analytical content, you need to subscribe to these guys, as well as the people I recommended back in my Soma and Amnesia videos. These guys do their homework. They don't play a game once, come up with a clickbait title, and put you in a trance of word salad before you can figure out what the hell they're even saying. All they want to do is present information to you, and that's something that I am trying to aspire to. But my angle is that I kind of want to prove it by wedging in what people are doing that is essentially the opposite of that. Now, I'm going to play Noah's clip again, and I'm going to actually respond to it, but this is the last time I'm actually going to be taking his argument seriously for Outlast.
You'll bleed out of your stumps every time you climb a ledge, open a door, or flip a switch for the rest of the game. Then the camera gets shattered. Still works, like you, but barely.
This is the part that I agree with, right? That you bleed out of your stumps every time you climb a ledge, despite the fact you don't actually bleed out every time you do it, but you've got blood on your hands to remind you of what's happened. I made the same point myself. The camera being shattered is another reminder of what you've been going through. I understand this is good, but then there's this.
Outlast's greatest area of skill as a piece of horror movie is how it shifts between hope and despondency, dangling the possibility of escape and then snatching it away.
So the angle that Outlast actually takes you from hope back to despondency is something that I would actually like to discuss, because I do agree that it does bait you a sort of level of hope as you play the game. The main examples of this would be the hope of when you've opened security finally, but then you get anesthetized, when you escape the several men in the dumbwaiter but then get knocked out by Traeger, When you finally get to the exit, trigger baited, but then find that it doesn't lead to an exit at all. And when you take the elevator down to the facility, but then it doesn't take you to the exit at all. This is only 4 times in the game. As much as I appreciate them, it's not a consistent motif, in my opinion. Or at least it's not consistent enough. This is what I mean when I say we could have the discussion about this, because this makes sense. This is something that the game definitely has. But he said this at the beginning.
Outlast's greatest area of skill as a piece of horror movie is how it shifts between hope and despondency.
What does the shift between hope and despondency have to do with horror movie? Or a piece of horror movie? Or the shift between the themes of being a horror game and a found footage horror movie. It doesn't make any sense. This is the best example I have of his opinions being shoehorned into this perspective of the video. He says it's Outlast's greatest area of skill as a piece of horror movie. It doesn't make any sense. I had 4 friends watch Noah's video with me individually. I didn't poison the well, I genuinely asked them if they could follow it with me. And they couldn't. They couldn't understand what he was saying. Listen to this selection here.
The first-person perspective makes the present tense harder to ignore. Video games, though, have always had that present tense feel to them. If you can properly intuit what a scene you're in looks like in the game's hidden script, it doesn't rely on the presumed novelty of a first-person perspective. It leverages the first-person perspective that's already assumed to be common into something more claustrophobic than usual for a game of its genre. But the deliberate hybridization of cinematic horror consumed passively with real-time game horror consumed actively makes Outlast notable and unique among both mediums. You're less of a player and more of a digital actor. This claustrophobic linearity is something that often works in the game's favor during its hectic moments. Would more mechanics make this a better game? Yes, but they might make it a worse movie. The game is continually shifting from calm to frenetic, from salvation to damnation.
I had to break up his sentences to figure out what point he was even trying to make, and that is terrible for analytical content. You're supposed to be making it easier for us to understand, not harder. I have only seen 1 video by Noah. That is the accepted caveat here. But I was seriously unimpressed. I don't get why he's so beloved, so popular, when he has almost no quality control. His entire video has loud background fuzz noise, not to mention the amount of mistakes he makes in editing. Listen to the times he simply leaves in bad takes, and also make note of the fuzz sound.
My camcorder said I had a little under 2 hours to simplify the purpose than if you could simply shotgun them in the face, from frying pan to fire and beyond. 2 of your fingers to a chatty but utterly insane fake surgeon henchman in horror media. Crazy cannibals who think to themselves.
But perhaps the most bothersome thing is that he can't even be bothered to edit out his own breaths. He's happy to edit pieces of footage here and there, like I think he has a selection of about 5 cuts. But he can't even remove his breaths, which would have been okay if it wasn't so loud. Listen to this shit. That is from a 10-minute stretch. 10 fucking minutes. I'm very sorry, but this, on top of the fact that his goal is so very clear with his video, made it extremely difficult to watch. This is a piss-poor video. Really low quality, really low effort. The reason I'm writing this so hard is because it's the most popular Outlast analytical video. Just like Joseph Anderson's Soma video, this thing poisons the well. And I'm just so tired of such terrible content being at the top. But I think that's it for for the Noah bit, so let's actually conclude with this game, shall we? Outlast was always a game that I had trouble taking seriously. I have this personal vendetta against it because it became extremely well known for building on Amnesia, despite drawing away from so much of what made Amnesia special and accentuating the elements I consider to be the basis for a horror game, the parts that were obvious. It didn't help that people reduced Amnesia in analysis to being an atmospheric game with great jump scares, while Outlast is more terrifying or more scary because it relies on a lot more of fear or something. buzzwords. They were everywhere and they were scary, but if you manage to get through all these videos, then you've probably seen, as I have, what this game has to offer. The story is relatively constructed to the point of being rather interesting, but the game kneecaps itself by restricting the knowledge of the events until we get the main information dumped from Wernicke. I thought I fucked up on my first playthrough though, to the point where I thought the Wall Rider actually was a ghost, but apparently one of the strengths of this game is that nobody knows what actually happened in it. Many are convinced after subsequent playthroughs that the Wall Rider was a demon from another universe. Several believe it was a manifestation of the pain, suffering, and death of the patients. While I literally assume that they are retarded because Wernicke explains most of this, you just need to listen. Though they mention other worlds to clearly throw a monkey wrench in the works. And that's what the story seemed like to me, to remain confusing and murky to try and have you fill in the blanks. Since even with my story summaries back in the earlier parts, there was so much unanswered rather than unexplained, because unexplained I can deal with, like how does the machine work, why is Murkov not having to deal with legal shit, what is Wernicke's motivation, etc. I would prefer to have some knowledge of how everything went down better, just more of everything, since it was all so small and simple yet confusing, which is precisely what is wrong with most of the developed characters, if you can call them that. But that for me was another strong weakness, something of an unexplained or poorly explained set of people that felt as though they were entirely created for this scenario in a world where nothing quite makes enough sense. I mean, everything is just set up for all of this. Everything only makes just nearly enough sense for the elements to act as a vehicle for the intentions of the game, and that intention is very, very simple. They want you to go through each and every area while making sure you at least encounter an enemy, and that it all gets up in your face and then you run away. Compare directly with Amnesia. Alexander alone, just Alexander, oozes charisma, oozes development. There's so much to know about him by comparison, his motivations, his goals, his quirks. Alexander has more behind him in terms of development than every character put together in this game, aside from maybe Wernicke. Unsurprisingly, all of the mechanics are built for that exact experience. Being chased and having things to interact with on your journey away from the enemy was essentially entirely what the game was showing off. And aside from the parkour and the overabundance of gore, it was the only unique thing about it in the genre. The management of your own movement and the light source you had were subject to far too many exploits that could circumvent the entire experience. The graphics were spectacular for the context, and I really think it helped sell the whole experience. This was massively important to the atmosphere and helped maintain it while the sound played a different role. The game, however, was riddled with scripting and spawning protocols that reflected in the AI, that once again brought the experience to a complete and utter farce. Too many experiences where the primary source of scares was a joke, where the fear was sapped by a confused AI. Not to mention the jump scares. Now, see, when Joseph Anderson described Soma as a game that is trying to tell you to be scared, I got confused because I really don't even know what the equivalent of actually being told to be scared would be in a video game, right? So my assumption would be when you are literally grabbed, shaken, and screamed at, you know? It's as if the game is saying, you need to be scared now. So Outlast fits this description for me perfectly. Honestly, Five Nights at Freddy's is the game that does it even more so. But at least in Five Nights at Freddy's, the scares will usually, I'm gonna say like 9 times out of 10, come because you failed the mechanical test, or the gameplay, I guess, as you would put it. While in Outlast, it's just based on where you are. As if you're moving through a level and you've got A through Z of jump scares to experience, and that is the points in the game where it'll go, be scared now, be scared now. Hopefully that makes more sense than what Joseph Anderson said. But I could understand if both need to be explained a bit better, but this isn't the crux of my point. I'm not saying that Outlast is not a scary game, that it's not a horror game, and that it's just telling you to be scared, because I'm not that retarded. The soundtrack is another incredible part to this game. The man behind it did a fantastic job. How it was implemented, however, is a muddled mess at times. We have the perfect use of music following the events, but at the same time we have it setting up events and forgetting that they have started or ended. The music was played obnoxiously loud at times, even when there was barely anything significantly happening, and it began to come across as pushy. All of this created an experience as a whole that spoke to many issues in more than just Outlast. This is an inherent issue in all horror games, that is to give yourself over to gain the value from the content, to get the best experience, which isn't as prominent in many other genres. We cannot say how much a person will or will not be immersed, but we can count the objective issues that will or will not hinder such an experience. Combine the many inconsistent and apparently unfinished parts to the game with the fact that we can see repetition everywhere, as they did not create enough content to pad the game for more than about 2 hours, and you realize that the game is rather hollow, and I don't believe they had much investment in a beginning, middle, and end structure. Compare this directly with Amnesia, and that they wanted to culminate in a moral decision set up by the experience in the entire game. That Amnesia gets more intense the deeper you go, with its realization about the character and its past, with its difficulty in terms of enemy evasion, with its mechanics getting more complicated. which then reveals Outlast to simply be a series of encounters, a series of set pieces, delaying you as much as they can so the very thin story is able to spread much further than it has any right to. Outlast in reality is very tiny and doesn't offer any replayability. But how long does it take to complete?
4 to 6 hour game.
But this game is only like about 5 hours long.
6 hour game.
Roughly 7 hours of play.
And about 8 or 9 hours.
I don't know why people can't just look at the site how long to beat in order to figure out the very objective information in terms of mean values, but anyway. Outlast doesn't change or innovate enough. The game has similar things happening throughout it. I would say that the over-the-top gore carried by the graphics and jump scares create the main source of gameplay that many people have come to love, while the soundtrack acts as an emotional dictator. Whistleblower is essentially being described this entire time, also since it clearly has every problem that Outlast has, but even worse since it's meant as a new experience, a development. Well, in reality it could have been just a part of the main game. I am certain that the main goal of the DLC was to be even more gory, even more outlandish, even more shocking, even more disgusting. Since it was clear that Outlast was being marketed for how much it broke standards of shock and disgust. It's not meaningful content in any way, and I know why people want deep analysis about how the game is of great quality. This game legitimately scared the living shit out of people, therefore they would like validation in terms of assessment of Outlast since they found it unbelievably scary. Telling them it is a good game is satisfying. Telling them it is a thinly veiled game with little substance will likely anger or annoy people. But hopefully to bring you guys to my side a little better, I could tell you that I found Slender the Arrival to be quite terrifying when I played it. Despite the fact that that game is very limited in terms of design, just like Outlast is. I guess what I'm trying to say is that even when a game is rushed or poorly designed in terms of your objective information, it doesn't mean you can't enjoy it, it doesn't mean it can't scare you, and I wouldn't take away from that from anybody. Though it does personally frustrate me when people say that Outlast was terrifying and Amnesia was boring. That sort of thing drives me nuts. But everyone is entitled to their experience. It's not a lie, it's genuinely what they felt. My first perception of this game was the very best of the style of horror that Five Nights at Freddy's occupies. The style of trying to capitalize on the simplistic, bloody, fleshy, bright, loud, and uncaring aspects of what we find scary as humans. But the key ingredients? Fast and frequent. Keep pounding with scares that are loud and bloody before the player realizes what is actually happening. Outlast is one of the finest examples of what happens when you give that concept a lot more money and time. And that is the cheaper and easier side of horror. The gore, the jump scares, the loud noises. It's not that we shouldn't have it at all, but should it be celebrated as one of the best horror games in existence? I mean, bloody hell, if you Google best horror games, you get Outlast as #1. And then sitting right behind it? Amnesia. But how do I explain this? Well, Amnesia was released and kickstarted the careers of many people on YouTube. I remember when my sister even shared a reaction video of Amnesia on Facebook, and I couldn't get over what this new obsession with watching people play shit was. Amnesia cemented its reputation as the game that was hilarious to watch people be scared by. In fact, many people know about Amnesia, but they haven't played it. Amnesia has a strong barrier to entry as well. The opening puzzle stumps many players. But then we got part 2 to this whole obsession with Outlast, another chance for everyone to rake in a whole set of views. People were now amping this whole genre up. This being scared of horror games thing has popped now, and it's practically just normal. But back then, this was the second coming, and people wanted to buy this shit. They wanted to play it for themselves. No barrier to entry since the first puzzle was to just survive the enemy. And the most of the game is about walking from A to B. Amnesia had basically no coverage from reviewers. Hardly anyone cared to talk about the themes of Amnesia, the deeper content in the game, because that wasn't popular. Nowadays, however, if Amnesia was released, it would get covered by everybody, and it would get covered for its intellectual content. We would get clickbait videos telling us about the hidden themes of Amnesia, the secret meaning of Amnesia, how Amnesia has a nostalgia problem. We would get told that Amnesia is brilliant, and here's why. Amnesia is garbage, and here's why. I mean, fuck, has anybody noticed this style? All video game movies suck, and here's why. Resident Evil 7 blew my mind, and here's how. Pocahontas was a mistake, and here's why. You get the whole explained tag too. Now some of these videos have some solid content in them, but my issue is that the whole here's why and here's how thing is basically guaranteeing that the video has what's in its title, whether or not that's true. As much as it sounds nitpicky, it is fucking clickbait. It's like seeing those ads on random sites. Lose 5 stone in 3 days, here's how. Double the size of your penis with no procedure, click to find out how. The videos imply a level of fact to them, that their premise will be confirmed by the content of their video, but the video itself is just an opinion piece, and oftentimes a poorly written one at that. But they wouldn't be able to put that in the title because that would be honest. Being honest and telling people that you are literally creating an analysis isn't enough because you won't get as many clicks. Telling people that you're making a critique of a game isn't enough. Regardless, anything that comes out now is ripped to shreds in some way, shape or form, and Amnesia missed that chance. Despite the fact that some people will delve into the past sometimes, and, you know, because I made a series that, you know, is all about Amnesia, but Outlast actually got reviewed and bought and fundamentally played by people. People had a much more emotional investment in the game. Honestly, Outlast had the benefit of being released at the opening of strong YouTube coverage, of Let's Plays and of scare comps, while also being at the beginning of horror, being so damn popular for the time on YouTube. Basically, right place, right time. I mean, I could do the exact same rant to explain why Ocarina of Time is looked at as the best game. It's not the best game. Not to mention that it took Amnesia till 2016 to release on one console, while Outlast was on PC, PS4, and Xbox One by early 2014. Another observation is that Amnesia asks the player to take control, to overcome their fears, to push themselves forward in almost every part of the game. You have to explore, read, figure out, and navigate the world as opposed to being taken on a ride, which is far more approachable for the average gamer, but far less meaningful. My personal feelings of this game is that it tried to capitalize on what made Amnesia successful, which is easily attributable to its design, but it got a majority of its success from the viral videos of people being terrified by playing it. So it went with that. Outlast made more scary jump scares and far more gore and even more sexual content. It is the hostel of horror games, and it is because it has so much of the incredible detail and effort to build a game from the ground up removed. If you want to see what happens when you strip a game of almost all the meaningful build-up for the scares alone, please see Five Nights at Freddy's. Because once you go any further, the content would barely be considered a game. I don't hate Outlast for being so derivative, but I think that Outlast cut corners in what makes an atmosphere so much more effective, and in its place copped out on some gory visuals and frighteningly loud music. The severe lack of competence in almost all AI in the game, from enemies to the music cues, ruins the experience for me. But the behaviors and spamming of similar assets is the final nail in the coffin. People are welcome to love Outlast. I know the game is very special to a lot of people. It's just that it wasn't very good. And with that, my series comes to an end. I can't imagine it was everything people were hoping for, but I can honestly say that I expected it to be a hell of a lot quicker. But it exploded during my time with it. Thank you to Biometric and Mr. Emi for helping me proofwatch these videos, and thanks to Fortier for the map art. And of course, thank you to the 3 plucky patrons that have decided to support my work. Thank you, Eric, Peter, Crowley, for beginning the journey to the first of my goals on this silly thing we call the internet. If anyone is new here and would like to support what I'm doing, then please check out my Patreon page. I will update it without fail every 2 weeks to let you know what the newest project is currently looking like. The link will be in the description, and for every penny added, it will increase my overall speed of production. One day I might even be able to finish a series within a month. I doubt it though. I tried a few new things on this series in terms of visuals and really trying to crack down on the consistency and writing aspects. Hopefully you guys may have noticed things here and there. It takes longer to render, but I mean, I just didn't like how Yooka-Laylee turned out in terms of its visuals. That was a bit of a mistake, and what is genuinely taking me longer is having more and more references to compile. I am sorry for the delays, but it happens, I suppose. Ultimately, I hope it will get faster, but for now, you guys are just going to have to wait indefinitely for when I eventually pop back up with a series. Next up for my videos, you can expect me to be tackling just about anything. I'm happy to talk about potential future projects with you guys in the comments, and ideas you may have, but I think it's about time I did a response video, don't you think? Regardless, I will have to see what is on offer. But between now and then, I will be releasing something new. It's going to be a podcast. A podcast in which me and a friend will tackle some topics and give you guys around 2 hours of content to potentially enjoy, between my bigger series is being completed. This thing is the pilot episode. It's going to be coming out, I don't know, about half a month after the Outlast series is done while I work on something new. And it is going to be specifically about Resident Evil 7, because I'm going to look back on it with the friend who recently completed it, and we're just going to talk about what we thought of the game. In future, we really have no limit on what the podcast could be about, and we'll probably have guests as well. So let me know what you guys think, and maybe I could tweak it in design and content as we go. But that's about it. If you really like the way I did shit in this video, then I would say you utterly must check out my critique of Resident Evil 7, and you simply have to check out my dissection on Amnesia and Soma, as that video may very well add some context to this one. But other than that, that is the end. Thanks again for watching my stuff, folks. I really appreciate it, and I will see you next time.